KCYBLP 103.5 FM is Cypress Radio. Cypress.
Live from Cypress, Texas, you've tuned into the Special Ed Section 504 Radio Hour. I'm your host, Louis Geigerman. Last week I opened the show with baseball, and this week I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to talk just a moment about baseball. The Houston Astros continue to be in first place over the Los Angeles Angels by 1.5 games and by 5.5 games over the surging Texas Rangers. It's a half game because they have a game in hand. So things are tight in the American League Western Division. So I'm unabashedly a fan of the Astros. Go Astros. But I told you last week about a Sugar Land, Texas kids baseball team with kids with special needs known as the Dream League that allows kids with all types of physical and cognitive impairments to just play the game and enjoy it. The team has been honored by being asked to play a one-inning exhibition game prior to the start of the international final of the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and it starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on August 29th. The team has raised over $100,000 to send the athletes, their families, and the angels that assist the players in playing the game to go to Williamsport. Now, ESPN had the rights to, or still do have the rights to, the Little League World Series, but they sold the rights to broadcast the game to the local PBS affiliate, WVIA. Now, WVIA wants to share the broadcast with KUHT, Channel 8 in Houston, so that they can broadcast the game and show it here in Houston. Now, there have been numerous attempts made by folks with the Dream League to contact KUHT to request that they televise it, but the station has turned a cold shoulder and basically haven't responded or returned phone calls. It's time now to call AUHT out about this. I mean, let's do what we need to do. We need to call them out. I'm asking that all the listeners from around the country, and especially the Houston area, to call the KUHT switchboard. I want you to keep doing it until they do it. And their phone number is 713-748-8888. Once again, it's 713-748-8888. And also you can send them an email, and you should send them an email through their website at houstonpublicmedia.org/connect. That's houstonpublicmedia.org/contact. Look, everybody knows that we're celebrating, or if they don't, they should know that we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I am absolutely on this, that it's deplorable that KUHT is not televising this event for these deserving kids. Shame on Channel 8. Once again, I want you all to call the switchboard at Channel 8 and tell them that you want the Dream League game to be televised on August 29th at 11 a.m. And again, the number is 713-748-8888. 713-748-8888. And the contact information for the station is houstonpublicmedia.org/connect. In that email, tell them you want that in their FCC file. They have to keep all comments, including complaints, compliments, whatever, in a file for the Federal Communication Commission. I want that in their file. And I'm going to keep bringing this up until KUHT agrees to do this. So I encourage everybody to do this. We need to be out there in force and let and let KUHT know that we need to have this game televised. Now we're going to go into the show, and as a reminder to contact me on the show, you can actually go to the station website and go to cypressradio.org, and then if you look at the tabs, one of them says Chat Live. You can chat live with me if you like. Another way to do that's cypressradio.org. Another is that you can tweet me at Louis Narda, LOUISNARDA, hashtag SPED Hour. And then another way to do it is you can email me, SPED Radio, SPED Radio 103.5 at gmail.com. So you can get us through chat at Cypress Radio. You can get me through tweet. You can tweet me at Louis Narda, hashtag SPED Hour, or you can go to email SPED Radio 103.5 at Gmail. That's if you have questions. Frankly, we want to know if you're listening. A lot of our listeners on this, I believe, are on the Internet, and it's kind of difficult to gauge who's listening and who's not. So please let us know, because we want to hear from you, even if you don't have a question. So today's guest is Lynn Akins. And Lynn is retired after 32 rewarding years in education. Most of that time, she was in the classroom working with students with significant instructional challenges. The final years of her career were spent in leadership roles, including IEP facilitation, she was a special education chairperson. She dealt in professional development, instructional coaching, and administration. And Lynn has always enjoyed a collegial relationship with parents and often acted as a parent and student advocate, ensuring effective programming for all students. One of her particular areas of expertise has been in the development of quality transition plans, and that's frankly why I'm having her on today. Lynn was a participant in the early development of the person-centered planning partnerships in Brazoria County. That's south of the Houston area. She has developed and presented professional development on best practices in transition at both local and at the national level. Now, Lynn is currently the advocacy director of the ARC of the Gulf Coast in Alvin, Texas. She serves families in 17 districts in the Galveston and Brazoria County areas. Lynn supports clients with professional and employment self-advocacy matters. Additionally, Lynn provides independent consultation and transition evaluations. She does IEEs to parents, and then she also does some consultations with districts. Lynn holds teaching certifications in both general and special ed, as well as a principal's certification. She was born and raised in Brazoria County and continues to make that her home. Her goal is to continue to use her expertise to assist parents obtain quality education for their children. Lynn, I want to welcome you to the Special Ed Section 504 Radio Hour.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you, and it's also nice to be had. Anyway, okay, all right. Well, I won't quit my day job. We won't do comedy here. All right. So anyway, we're going to start with some real basic questions for the listeners. Let's start today with what effectively is transition?
Well, transition in the context of what we want to look at is a change of status for the student. They're moving from primarily behaving as a student to looking at the emerging skills that are going to be needed to be an adult in the world they live. And part of that is going to have a focus on what it's going to look like employment-wise. What would that look like post-secondary training, college-wise, or services that you would need outside agencies? How are you going to maintain your home? how are you going to be involved in your community, and that also the overriding thing is that there's a push that, one, that the child needs to participate in the planning to the maximum extent possible, but also that their preferences and interests must be considered and addressed. And that's basically what transition in the context of education means.
So, in context of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, if I'm not mistaken, there are three things that are overriding as the purpose of special education, and that's to prepare a child for further education, independent living, and employment. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Well, and what the school will need to demonstrate is what's called, and the law will call this, a coordinated set of activities that's designed to be result or outcome oriented, so that these activities will help move that kid to successfully meet whatever his post-secondary goals are.
I see. And
again, remembering that the kid should be at the focus of all of this.
If you don't mind, would you expand on that issue, that topic of coordinated activities? What do coordinated activities really mean? Well,
and that's the conundrum, because it will depend on the kid. But what has to happen is there has to be goals that are written around the kid's interest and preference that help him meet these things. But the coordinated activities might be exploring the world of work. So it might be on-the-job training. It could be researching colleges. It could be researching different training programs. It might be, and in some cases, programs, they're going into their community to look for recreational and leisure opportunities along with employment possibilities, and also what kind of places within the community. So let's say I have a child that they are going to need independent skills in how to pay bills. So there would be a coordinated activity in that sense might look like I have goals wrapped around personal finance budgeting. I'm going to the bank. I'm obtaining a debit card. I'm learning about interest. I'm learning how to fill out applications for different kinds of, like credit, learning how to manage credit if that was possible. But also even, and depending on the level of the skill or what is needed, those activities should be part of that kid's plan. But for, let's say, a kid, part of another coordinated set of activities may basically be the 4-year plan that they have in high school, so that whatever the career and the technology classes that are available that meet their post-secondary needs or would support them getting that, then that should be evidenced in that kid's transcript and on his 4-year plan. And another coordinated set of activities could be that he's decided upon a certain training and maybe he needs a certain GPA or maybe he has to take a foreign language. What will that look like? Sometimes it could be like if I'm just going to be seeking 504 services, a coordinated activity may be that I need to demonstrate that I know how to get that service at the setting that I'm moving forward to.
What I see schools doing frequently, and of course I do a broad range of different disabilities, from those that have intellectual impairments to those that have ADHD, or for those that have specific learning disabilities, to those in the autism spectrum. But what I see as a kind of a universal thing that I see districts do is to deal with the job exploration. They sit them in front of the computer and have them look at various jobs online. And my concern is for a lot of these students, that's not sufficient by simply sitting them in front of a computer. You almost have to touch, taste, smell, if you will. You really need to have more kinesthetic, being there and seeing how somebody's job, what their job really looks like. I mean, I think it's hard enough for those that don't have any differences or any challenges. It's hard enough to figure out what we're going to do when we want to work, later on. For instance, I didn't know I was going to be an advocate when I was in college. Of course, when I graduated, we were in the infancy of the special ed law. But to really get an idea what people do on the job, you almost need to see what they do. What do you think about that, Lynn?
Well, interestingly enough, and I think that oftentimes what we'll see happen in special ed, it starts trickling down from the top. So even in general ed programs now, you are seeing a component that they actually are moving more towards an internship or a job shadowing component. I've seen full-blown programs in some of the more innovative districts in the state, and they're beautiful because they're doing exactly what you're saying. And these are for non-disabled children, by the way. This is for all children graduating under a certain graduation code. They're making that a requirement to say at some point you have to do an internship in your area of interest. And the way the graduation standards have changed to where students are going to be going down a career path to get a certain endorsement. So let's say they were going to get an endorsement in the health field, health professions. There would be a component within there where they're actually doing some sort of internship, if you will, within that area. So that's a great program. That's really the way that people are wanting to see this go. The one thing that we need to be doing as parents with children with special needs, you need to make sure your kid's getting access to that. Because, again, it may already be existing in your district, but it hasn't trickled down yet. So that is a good trend, but knowing that even if your district didn't have it, there's nothing from having the parent leverage to do some sort of internship anyway.
So
you need to talk about that as far as that can be your child participating in an internship program. They may need a job coach or a job specialist to help them to provide the transportation to that. But that can be part of the transition plan, and that could be a goal because it could be measurable. And it also can be something that can speak to meeting that post-secondary goal. And a parent can drive that and request that at an age-appropriate time, or when if you're fortunate to be in a district that's already moving that way. I've seen good programs. I saw Spring Branch had a program like that. I saw the same program in Lake Travis. The disconnect for me, I can't speak about Spring Branch, but I can tell you the disconnect for me in some of the other districts is that there's this great program. It's just not getting to the more involved students.
Do you have any idea? I mean, that's a great point. Do you have any idea how those districts were able to make that happen? Was it from a scenario of, they were proactive, where they made where they developed partnerships with those school districts? I deal with so many. I don't know that a lot of them are doing it. The question is, do you know? You may not know how they were able to make that happen. How the districts were able to make that happen with area companies. Do you have any idea on that?
I don't know. I know that in talking to districts that are trying to develop these relationships with businesses, that's when they're in the introductory stages, we don't know how it gets going. Unfortunately, what I see that a lot of good vocational adjustment coordinators are doing, they're kind of bypassing waiting for it to trickle down. They're doing it from the ground up. So you will see good vocational adjustment coordinators out there in their community developing those relationships with business, and then what you see this push from the bottom, and hopefully those people that are the decision makers at the top are going to come and meet them in the middle somewhere. So even if you don't have it, it doesn't keep teachers, vocational adjustments, anyone going out there and advocating and building those relationships. Where it gets tough is working with more of the larger corporate places. That's a big shift, that you really need to look at more of the mom and pop type places where there's not a lot of levels of management. So that, because sometimes people say, oh, well, we can't do internship here. We can't do on-the-job training. We have too many laws or whatnot that get in the way. And that's really not the case. They just have a lot of hoops that they have to jump through all the way up to, it's difficult to find out who is the person that makes that decision at Kroger. And that takes a lot of time to go through those layers. So sometimes you can circumvent that problem by going to a family-owned business. They are much more amenable and much more likely to help parents and students with disabilities to crack into the job market, if you will.
That's a great point. Thanks for going into that. Okay, so just kind of summarize. So why is transition important?
Well, the biggest reason is the unemployment rate. So in 2014, only 1/3 of individuals identified as disability were employed, whereas 2/3 of non-disabled people were employed. So there's a huge discrepancy. Another problem is that people who do hire and employ on a regular basis people with disabilities find a couple of things. They have a higher attendance rate at work, a lot lower absentee. They have a lot more of what they call a better attitude, or I enjoy coming to work. I like work. They don't impact the sick leave, and they have a healthier disposition. So, and they enjoy the work they do. So the problem that you find is you have these people that have all what we call soft skills for employment. They possess those. I'm happy to come to work. I come to work all the time. I enjoy my task. Who doesn't want an employee like that? But when you find out that people that are employing people with disabilities, that's what they largely report about those individuals, but yet we can't get these people hired because of the disability. And that's because people will go through human resources offices, and the function of a human resource office is to disqualify people or to compare people across the board. So really, that's what you kind of want to stay away from. That's why I say go to your more mom and pop place, go around your human resources. So the concept of having a kid, like you're saying, sit in front of a computer and watch videotapes, video of various jobs, it's the same problem when you say, well, these kids are going to sit there and fill out job application after job application. We now know that that's not how people with disabilities get employed.
Yeah.
So, you can always fill out a job application after the fact, after I've already gone and sold you. But if I go through human resources and I'm comparing you across the board with everybody else, well, it's just a way to disqualify people for a job.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
When should transition begin?
It can begin really at any age. The question I always ask parents, and this was a good conversation starter, and because a lot of times when you're dealing with parents, young parents, they may not be they may still be in maybe a grieving process sometimes for, I didn't know this was the child I was going to have, and I had all these aspirations. And you tell them things about, well, we need to plan for the long. Well, they're still in the here and now. So the time to do transition is at the beginning. But one of the questions when I talk to a parent who's really not really seeing the big picture or having trouble with it, I'll say, they'll go, oh, well, there's not going to be any special needs, or I'm not seeing a problem. You simply ask for a conversation, will this student have a driver's license and drive? And when I get them to talk about that, then they can start saying, well, I don't know. And, of course, if you're very young children, that's not the one. But if I'm looking for a parent that's a kid that's in the middle school level and they're not really ready to move forward and talk about, well, what will this look like long term? I ask that question, and then if the answer is, well, no, they're not going to drive a car, and I go, well, then they're going to need some support for transportation. And then that opens the door for all those conversations. Legally, there has to be a conversation at 14. What most experts in the field really wanted to push for was 12, was when the plan should be started. Texas agreed on 14, knowing that on the other end there was a push for it to be at 16, and 16 is too late. We know that. But if your kid is significantly involved and you can anticipate that they're going to need a level of support for the rest of their life or when the parent steps away, then I would say transition should begin sooner than later. So if I need to do enrollment with my local MHMRA, maybe at 3 or 4. And that's definitely a transition. Or if I'm seeking service through DARS for autism or visually impaired or early childhood intervention, that needs to happen sooner than later.
Well, of course, in Texas, if you have an autism spectrum disorder, really transition can begin at any age.
Absolutely.
At any
right.
age. But here's the thing I think people should be mindful of. Before I mentioned what the purpose of IDEA was, and that was to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. I believe that every single goal and objective that we write should be mindful of that. So it actually starts earlier. In other words, that's the end game that we're shooting for. And, otherwise, there's so much of a focus just on academics, but we have to look at all three of those areas. Again, independent living, further education, employment, all three. It's not independent living or further education or employment. It's all three that we have to be mindful of. And I think that's critical, so that the whole idea was for these kids to be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens and living independently. That's what we were looking for. So we've already talked about when it should begin. Let's talk about something called Indicator 13. What is that?
Well, Indicator 13 is the definition of it, but then I'll tell you what it really is. It's like the percent of youth that have IEP goals and are 16. And what you're looking at is, do these goals have appropriate, measurable post-secondary aspects to them? And so that was what indicated, that was the definition of Indicator 13. When the feds came out, they had 8 areas that they wanted to look at. But Texas always likes to do a little more, and so they added 13 and 14. And so that's where the name Indicator 13 came in. Because Indicator 14 is how you check after they've graduated, so 2 to 3 years out of, I think it's 2 years out of when they've exited public school.
It's 2 years.
The question to them is, are you doing what you said you're going to do? Are you employed? Are you going to college? Are you in training? Are you sitting at the house? That kind of thing. So now there aren't all 13 indicators. There's about 8 that the school has to look at. Again, the focus is on what do the IEP goals look like, and the question the school has to answer is just what you said. are there appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals in the areas of training, education, employment, and where appropriate, independent living skills. And then, so that is what they're looking at. And also a big, big area they're looking at is, does the student participate in this to the extent possible? And can the school district evidence that the kid was even invited to his meeting?
Interestingly, the districts have to keep records and report to the state education agency on their compliance on Indicator 13. And that's something that parents may want to do an open records on, because they have to report to, in Texas, the Texas Education Agency. Most other states require that as well. So it'd be interesting to see how your state actually is complying with that Indicator 13.
And you can go to Transition in Texas, and that's just transitionintexas.org, which is the TEA website. And on there, it will tell you, or it eventually is. I'm looking at the site now. I guess they're kind of in the middle of kind of cleaning it up or making repairs to it, so it's not working real fluidly. But it has the indicators on there, and it looks like you can also go in there and find out the performance. You know, where is the state falling down?
And that's, once again, for listeners, anybody in the country can look at it as well, because that's something you can use, transitionintexas.org, correct?
Yes.
All one word.
And it's one-stop shopping for parents. They're on there. They have, like, from, I'm looking at college, I'm looking at training, I'm looking at the law that supports this is all there. All of the supports are there, because that was one thing that Texas was trying to do, and they've been working on this for a number of years. And it's like I said, they built the plane as they're flying it. And so it gets better, but it still does have some glitches. I was looking at, they have a really good, or what was supposed to be, what was touted to be a good employment guide for people with disabilities. But then when I went to the employment guide to look at it this morning, they have, like, at the bottom where you can post what your feelings were. And the people were saying, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not as helpful as it should be. So, again, but one good thing is you do have an area to immediately put your feedback in there. If you don't think that guide is meeting what you thought it would be, then for sure you should get on there and make comments, because they are looking at those things.
You know, I want to go back for just a second for listeners to look at something, and that is, we were talking about having internships. Mm-hmm. And one place that we should think about that we should, and a lot of schools are unaware of it, even those in the disability community are not aware of it, is that we actually have an affirmative action program for those with disability. The Obama administration has basically through the Labor Department have created what they call Schedule A employment. If you go to if you have a job that an individual is qualified for, that individual can bypass the competitive hiring practices. Mm-hmm. That is for an individual that has cognitive or physical impairment, and that's stated by a physician or a health professional, and that impacts their ability to work, that you can avoid the competitive hiring practices. But what they're doing now is that there's also a section where you look for persons with disabilities. They have places for student internships with the federal government, paid internships with the federal government. So particularly if you're in areas where you have a lot of government, U.S. government jobs, that's the place to look for. That's at usajobs.gov. Explore that. Look at the Schedule A employment. And also they have stuff for students. So I think that would be a great place to go.
That's that's great.
Yeah. Let's talk a minute about waiting lists. Okay. And how does somebody get on them, and what waiting list do they need to be on?
Well, typically the two waiting lists that you want to get on are the local MHMRA, and that should be done as soon as possible. And then secondly, depending on the nature of the disability, the DARS. But for sure, once your kid gets to be 16, if you're going to be looking at that vocational component, then you would want to register and enroll with DARS for the vocational aspects of DARS. And to enroll with them for the vocational rehabilitation parts of it, you go online, you find the office, and there's an interview that goes in place. At that point, your student will go to the local DARS office, or they can come to the school to meet with your student. And at that point, you establish that relationship. Now, DARS also deal with adults, so what they like for parents to do is exhaust their options at the public school level and stay until they're 21, depending on when their birthday is, in an 18-plus program, or to just be doing some kind of career component, because that hopefully will enable them to have a job when they exit from high school. That actually helps the DARS people support the employment, because they have time-limited services. And so you have only a specific amount of time that you can get job coaching. You might get it for, I'm starting a job, or they've changed the job task that I'm doing. I need a little bit more training. Those are time-limited. And so the push might be from your DARS rep to stay in school. However, DARS can help help you do transportation. If you need to buy equipment for a job, or a uniform for a job, or a textbook for a class that is for your employment area, they can help you with funding for that.
Right, and also they can help pay for tuition to school, books,
yes.
And not just for undergrad. They could also do graduate work, pay for graduate degrees
Right.
as well, if that's what an individual needs to get to work. So keep that in mind. In spite of
Right.
what you might find from a particular rep, that's actually what they are required to do. So let's talk about how, and kind of briefly tell us how does the state ensure that appropriate transition is taking place?
Well, they do it through the self-auditing indicator 13.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, what they're checking up on is indicator 14, which says, is this, in fact, working?
Okay.
So that's their main way to do that.
So, I guess if somebody can look at their audit to see what they actually did, for a particular difference.
The state takes it pretty seriously, because indicator 13, unlike a lot of other auditable things, is 100% compliance for a district. And so the process is the district comes in and it says, I want to see these folders. You don't know in advance whose folder they're going to review.
You mean the state education agency comes in and says
right.
they want to
They'll come in
work.
and they'll say, these are the folders that you're to review. And they are a range of students that represent, percentage-wise, what's the disability and the nature of disabilities in your particular district. So they're going to look at those folders. Again, when you're talking about like a bigger district, you could be reviewing hundreds of folders. So when you talk about one item is missing in one student's folder, then you're not in compliance.
Okay. Let's go I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, they take that pretty serious. They give you about 2 or 3 years to make that correction. But if you can't make that correction, then that, of course, then kicks in some other things that TEA will come and do to a district. So it's a high compliance area. Again, they mean business, because if you go to Region 18, where the legal framework for the ARD process is held, if you look at that legal framework, a parent can go in and find who is the person, the name and the contact information for each and every district in the state of Texas, who is responsible for transition. And that's the only person that I know that you can go into the TA website, go, who is this person, and who is tasked with making sure this compliance works in your district.
That's a salient line. Let's move forward here. Okay, what can a parent do to prepare for effective transition planning?
Well, to be honest with you, you want to make sure if you have a really good transition coordinator, you can find out that person's contact information. And at any point in time, when you have questions, you should be calling that person and making a relationship with them and start finding, as you said at the beginning, you begin with the end in mind. So what does the end look like? What programs are there now? Are there internships? Are you thinking about developing internships? So if your kid's in 4th grade and you can meet with that transition coordinator, you have that conversation. The good transition coordinators that I know that in our area, they are more than happy to meet with a 2nd grade, a 3rd grade. They'll meet with any grade level parent and student to help begin that plan. But if you don't have that, if that person's not really amenable to you, or say, oh, I don't need to talk to you till you're 14, you may need to seek more information. And what you should do is go to transitionintexas.org. Make sure that your student has had age-appropriate vocational assessment. The problem with that is the state does not tell you what that tool is. They give you some suggestions, but most of the good stuff is free. So parents can go on and they can do an interest inventory via ONET. And ONET is a government site, and it's called mynextmove.org. You can go to that. That's what the old occupational handbooks used to be in the day. But now it's all online. It's a very safe site. You can go there, do an interest inventory on your child, and then you can search career clusters, training. It'll tell you the occupational outlook. So when I was working at the 8th grade level, every 8th grader did ONET on my campus, whether they were special, 504, ESL, it didn't matter. We wanted every student to have that planning. Many districts do have vocational assessment at that age that for all their students, but it can just be an interview. And I do see that very often because at the very minimum, the state will say, well, that's an interview, that's an informal assessment. And it can be age appropriate. But my take on that is you should do more than the minimum. And the more significant the outside supports will be down the line, probably the more assessments you should do.
Well,
so a parent can go online and do ONET with their kids. And they can bring that information into their art. It can truly help do planning.
I think it would be important, too, for people to understand that their child should have a functional vocational assessment done. And it would work, as opposed to just trying to figure out how heavy an object they can lift or how many words per minute. It looks at what their functional skills will be for them to actually get a job. And similarly, while the district can conduct a functional vocational assessment, you can also request independent educational evaluations for functional vocational assessments. That's an important tool that I don't see enough districts actually using and parents asking for. It's actually a critical assessment that you need.
Yeah. And it's like I said, because there hasn't been a definitive tool that, these are the 5 tools you need to use that qualify as age-appropriate vocational assessments. Then there's a lot of, you get really good districts, you get districts who maybe not so much, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to, and that's why I said it's important for you as a parent to make a connection with that transition coordinator and ask them these very questions, because if they can't answer them, then you may need to start pushing in that aspect.
Okay, let's briefly go through the difference between a power of attorney and a guardianship, real quick.
Well, okay, a power of attorney, that's another good question that should be being talked about with your transition coordinator and really at the ARD. As the state will, on or before the 17th birthday, they're going to give each parent what's called notice of transfer of rights. And that's where they're going to explain to the parent and the student that without intervention through guardianship or power of attorney, your child will be their own legal guardian, and all the signatures will change. The parent is now invited to the ARD. The school will inform the student of that, and they'll have them sign the documentation that says, you know, forever we will invite your parents and keep your parents in the loop, even though you are your own legal adult, and we're not breaking confidentiality because this is how we do business and you've been informed. So what parents need to decide about, and the power of attorney is a good tool for even if your child is going to go to college, because you may need to have that power of attorney in order to access their records. A lot of times parents will seek medical powers of attorney so that if their child who's off at school, there has to be some medical decisions made, that the parent can be involved in that. So power of attorneys are where the child can go to the lawyer and say, it's okay for my parent to handle my business. To get guardianship, you would have to say that the child is not able to make that determination for themselves. And so guardianship means that I'm going to strip that person of their legal adult rights. And then the keys to guardianship is that is forevermore an arrangement between us. You're going to have to bring in a third party, be it a lawyer or somebody assigned through the state, that will make sure that whoever retains guardianship of that individual is doing their right by that person.
Lynn, I think as we go forward in other shows, I'm going to get deeper into guardianships and powers of attorney when we have counsel on. I just kind of wanted to just do a little overview at what, certainly at 18, the decisions are going to be made. If we don't have a power, either an educational power of attorney executed or a power or a guardianship, the kid's going to make those decisions, and that may not be such a good thing to do. So I'll explore that later in another show. Okay, how do we know if we have a good individual transition plan for the child? How do we know that?
Well, again, you're going to have good assessment data, and you want to also look at what is the post-secondary goal, and has your child's interest been embraced in that? In other words, you may see a campus that has a good welding program, or maybe has a good food service or a hospitality program on campus. That's their specialty. So you may find that a lot of kids are in food service and welding, and it's not because they have a passion for food service or they have or their preference is to become a welder. It's because that's what we have. So you want to make sure that whatever career and vocational classes that your child is taking is actually part of that. Sometimes districts will say, well, they're in a CAPE class. Well, one is not equal to another. So if my preference is for technology, then I need to be in the technology classes and not the agriculture classes. So those are the kinds of things that parents will know that plan is in place. Having that conversation about long-term planning should be part of a good ITP. And understanding that when you have questions, you really need to be able to go to that transition coordinator at that district to be helping you through this process because things change.
So where can we get information other than it for the school? I think you already mentioned transitionintexas.org. You got a couple other websites that might be a good source.
And you can link to this one from transition.org, but to me, this is my go-to place because you can find everything. You can find guidance on assessment. You can find guidance on what lesson plans should look like to address these areas. Therefore, what goals should I be looking at? And those are academic to social to pre-vocational, all the way, independent living skills, all the way up and down the line. And that is the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center, or NSTTAC. And if you just
say that again.
NSTTAC.
That's N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, T as in Tom, A as in Albert, C as in Charlie.org.
Yes. If you go there, you're going to find that they're the gold standard. You're going to find evidence-based practices there. So if you're in question about whether, well, my kids have this class, I know we've got the post-secondary goals, but are evidence-based practice being implemented in there to help us achieve this? So that's a really good place to go. Again, my other one that I really, really go to is ONET, because ONET shows all kinds of employment, shows it in different areas of the country, also gives you a forecast or an outlook, because what you don't want to do is spend years and years and years training a student to do a task that is drying up and that won't be, for years I taught students how to operate coin rolling machines because every bank in my area had coin rolling machines, but they don't do it that way anymore. Banks now purchase, the coins come to them pre-rolled.
So that's it's onetcenter.org, right? Onetcenter.org.
Yeah.
That's ONET Center.
Oh, no, you just put in ONET. There's no center.
ONET, okay.
Is just,
Okay, one last question from you. Okay, so if to find out more about person-centered planning, would that be in transitionintexas.org? Would there be information on that?
Yes. And you might want to look at, of course, ARC has a self-determination assessment.
ARC?
Free. Yeah, ARC self-determination assessment. And that is, you can go to I'm going to give you a website that has all of them, and it's through Oklahoma University. The Zorro Institute has a lot of free, good self-determination things there. And it's just education.ou.edu/Zorro. ZARROW.
Yay, I like that. I like OU. I've had season tickets since 1950.
Well, they have a tremendous set of resources there that are free. And, school districts like free.
Oh, yeah. Amen. Well, listen, Lynn, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. You provide some great information. Heck, we may have to have you on again to talk about this subject, but we really appreciate you coming on the show today, and this information is vital, and I hope people will look at some of those websites that provides great information. So thanks for coming on the show, and I'll be catching you later. All right, we're going to go to a break now, and then when we come back, we're going to bring on a special guest, David Beinke. So we'll be back shortly. Have a great day. Thanks again, Lynn.
Peekaboo, smile.
Smile, buddy.
Come on, smile. Oh, honey. He's still not smiling.
Maybe he's not a smiler.
Yeah, maybe he's just not a happy baby.
Maybe he's just being a boy. You know how boys are.
Or maybe he's teething. Oh, poor baby. I think his gums hurt.
Maybe he's just tired.
Or maybe his tummy hurts. He didn't eat that much.
Maybe he's not ticklish.
You think maybe he's scared of the dog?
Maybe he'll outgrow it. Maybe it's a phase. Maybe he just doesn't like smiling.
Maybe he has autism, and we can definitely do something to help.
Maybe is all you need to find out more about autism. No big, joyful smiles by 6 months is one early sign. Learn the others at autismspeaks.org/signs or see a doctor today for an autism screening. The sooner it's diagnosed, the better. And it can make a lifetime of difference. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
This is a guided meditation on parenting. Begin by finding a comfortable, relaxed position. Let out whatever stress is in your body. It could be from the time you left your daughter's blouse in the dryer too long and it shrunk 4 sizes, or when you donated her private diary to the public library, or when you thought chaperoning the school dance meant actually dancing in the school dance. Whatever it is, let it go. The fire you started with that experimental dinner, let it go. The time you drove away from the gas pump with the gas pump, let it go. 3, very relaxed. 2, there you go. 1.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
KCYBLP 103.5 FM is Cypress Radio. Cypress.
Okay, we're back. I have my guest today. We're going to have a kind of an interesting conversation here with my friend David Beinke. David is the senior special ed advocate with Circule and Associates out of Round Rock, Texas, and helps provide a unique brand of support for children with special needs in their educational environment to families throughout the state of Texas. Actually, he's been in other states, too. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in education, is also a former U.S. Marine Sergeant, Semper Fi, claiming the moniker and related email address of Special Ed Marine. David has over 20 years of experience in the Texas mental health and mental retardation community system, and both as a supervisor and a provider of case management services. He also works with a social worker, Robin Petty, to facilitate representation to persons in receiving their disability benefits, and he's very skillful in advocating for persons in employment, labor unions, and workmen's comp cases. David's also a talented musician. He frequents various musical venues in Central Texas as a drummer. His many skills do not end here, as David also provides private chess lessons as an avid player. You know, we've never played chess before. We need to do that. Dave, you'll probably kick my butt, though. Anyway, David is a longtime Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. That's COPA member, as I'm a member as well. He's a co-chair of the COPA Advocate Committees and he's a sitting member of its board of directors. As many of you already know, David is a definite gift of gab and has artfully mastered the pun. All of us that know him as colleagues and those that know him with their firm, that he is very punny, as he often says, and under IDEA, a parent should never be caught between a round rock, that's where he lives, and an ARD place. An ARD place is what we call IEP meetings in Texas. So, David, welcome to the Special Ed Section 504 Radio Hour.
Yeah, thank you, Lou, for having me on as a guest. I appreciate it.
You betcha. One of the things we wanted, and David will be on another show. We're going to be on, I believe, on September 5th. I think that's the date we talked about. So that'll be an interesting show talking about what we both do. But, David, we've been talking about transition today. And one of the things that we were talking about, you and I have talked about, is utilizing the Olmstead decision, which was a Supreme Court decision that came out a few years ago. And I'd like you to talk about what Olmstead is briefly, and then how we use it and apply it in special ed matters for transition.
Sure, very good. Olmstead, O-L-M-S-T-E-A-D, Olmstead decision was a Supreme Court decision back in June 1999, where they basically rejected the state of Georgia's enforcement of institutionalization of individuals with disabilities, because what came out of that was a community integration mandate. Because the case revolved around two individuals who desired to live and work and participate in community activities. The state of Georgia system was set up to know they had to live in a nursing home. And they sued. COPA member John Zimmering took the case. It took about 5 years. And ADA, if you really think about it, you really break it down to its very root. It's about equal access and equal opportunity. Equal access and equal opportunity. That's really what ADA is. And so Olmstead, as the Supreme Court decided that, basically said individuals with disabilities who reside in institutional type settings have the right to live in the community, the integrated setting. That was 1999. Fast forward to about 2.5 years ago, we had another wonderful case come out of the Ninth Circuit called Tustin. And for a long time in the special ed world, or the world of IDA, everything ADA, 504, and IDA were considered if you were compliant. If you were IDA compliant, you were ADA compliant. Well, the Ninth Circuit finally broke that barrier and said, just because you're IDA compliant doesn't mean you're ADA compliant. And they were looking at a student who had a hearing issue, and under ADA Title II, they have a right to select their own communication system. Again, equal access and equal opportunity. Following that, about a year later, in Springfield, Massachusetts, the Department of Justice looked at a group of schools in Springfield, Massachusetts, the city of Springfield, Massachusetts, and they had a number of individuals with behavior problems and disabilities and other issues, all in one school setting. They had a congregate setting where they had all the folks there. The reason being, we have a place we can serve them. We'll put all our experts there. We'll put all our psychologists there. We'll put all our behavior therapists there. When unfortunately they had to take these kids out of other schools, and they didn't have access to the regular things that schools have. Again, remember, ADA, equal access, equal opportunity. They couldn't have after-school activities, couldn't play sports, couldn't have band, couldn't have art, and so they moved it there. And then more recently, which has just really floated our boat. I mean, we are just jazzed up beyond all means. DOJ went after the entire state of Rhode Island, the Department of Education in Rhode Island. They were finding that there was lots of segregated facilities. Sometimes Lou and I call them life skill ghettos. And that meaning is they were in sheltered workshops. They were in congregate settings where they had no employment at all. They were working, putting, the typical picnic supplies in a paper bag and working piecemeal, or they're getting paid 50 cents an hour. They did not have that equal access and equal opportunity to participate in the community. The settlement agreement of Rhode Island, this is what we'll really want to highlight, talked about making sure that individuals with disabilities had full access and integration in the community, an integrated community setting. That's really what, and it's not just for work, but where you live, how you spend your leisure time, what recreational activities you spend. But it's an incredible mandate using Olmsted. And Olmsted, starting with that institutional case, has now spread to where individuals with disabilities, and that includes kids in special ed or under IDA, have access and opportunity to be part of the community. And that is really, really where we've come. It's this year it's 25 years of the American Disability Amendments Act. How wonderful. And if you look at and examine the IDA definition of transition, remember, transition is the bridge to the future. What is this kid going to do when he leaves school? When the kid leaves school, it's all about independence and employability. Independence and employability, because that's an equal access, equal opportunity to that, because that's what any kid needs. When you're 18, 19, 20, whatever time you leave school, that is the idea of school. You have someone who's independent, you have somebody who's employable. The last thing we need is another unemployed 18-year-old running around the community. And so if you bookend the language of IDA, it talks about being able to function in the community setting, being able to function in the community workforce, being able to function in social leisure time, recreational activities, and live in the community. That's the same thing Olmsted says. So one of the things we're starting to do here in Texas is remind schools of their obligation to make sure that students, even though they're special ed, remember the law of ADA and IDA is different, is to remind children with special ed that they have an equal opportunity and equal access to the same thing every other kid does. And that's it in a nutshell. Lou, do you have a question?
Yeah. So how would we suggest that a parent advocate for their child in a transition meeting? What kind of things would we say that they need to do in writing their transition plan? What elements would we say that they would need, that the school district would need to do to utilize Olmsted?
Well, I think there's two steps. Number one, every child is different. And with that being said, just a minute, I'm getting feedback. Sorry, I was getting feedback from my buffering stop. Okay. In IDA, doesn't matter what age they start their transition, it's all based on assessment. And what you're assessing is what does that child need? What can that child do? So if you really think about employability, whatever it looks like for that child, it's based on what are you good at, what do you like, what are you good at, and what do you like. And there's assessments that you use to do that, just like everybody in the military. Trixie has that. It's been out there for 50 years. It determines what military occupational specialty, what you will do in the military. The same is true for children. The first thing is make sure you have incredibly in-depth assessments for that child in those areas of independence and employability. Again, there's a lot of subsets under that. Are they able to communicate? Are they able to get there on time? Are they able, what is their level of written expression? How about their ability to fill out a job application? Can they navigate transportation? Are they able to use the yellow pages? Are they able to use a checkbook? So a full assessment, not the traditional academic assessment to see where their cognitive functions or what their academic skills are, but a vocational transition assessment that looks at all their abilities in regular activities of daily living, their ability to perform on the job, which is basically what do you want and what are you good at, because that's really what a career is. I'm not talking about flipping burgers at McDonald's. Every child has the ability to zero in on what they are good at and what they enjoy. And that's really it. So the first piece is making sure there's a full range of transition assessments to really know what that child is, and you develop a plan from there, because some children will take a little longer. Sometimes you have to have a 10-year transition plan or a 5-year transition plan. It's not just done in a year or two, because children with disabilities sometimes take a little longer to develop those skills to become independent and employable. But assessment is the absolute key. And I'm not talking about assessments, what do you like, what do you think you like, what do your parents think you like. I mean, actual vocational batteries. Doris has a wonderful. If what you take is 17 or 18, DARS has some wonderful vocational data.
Again, DARS is the Department of Assisted Rehabilitation Services. Most all states have a rehabilitation office that help individuals with disabilities. So it's a different acronym in your state.
Right. Yeah, basically every state has a vocational rehabilitation service, and that is the main state agency that will fund one's employment. Additionally, you don't want to let the school off the hook too early. If you, just as they did at the turn of the century, most folks went to 8th grade and they figured out what line of work they're going into. We see this in other countries as well. If you're in Germany, you go to 10th grade, you take a test. If you're not the university bound, you go into the vocational trades to learn a skill to become employable. We've come full circle on that. Many schools are developing academies or groups in food service, in horticulture, technology, engineering. So we see that coming back, and over the last 2 years, even the Texas legislature has wind in their sails on that to really zero in to make sure our students with disabilities, well, all students in particular students with disabilities, are employable or have a track for some level of employability in their life. And if they're not fully employable or competitively employable, there's lots of variations before that. You can be part-time. You can be enclave employment. You can have a job coach. You can have supportive employment. It's far beyond this conversation. But the future is just absolutely incredibly exciting for individuals with disabilities based on Olmstead, plus the nudge. The Texas legislature is giving our schools to say, look, guys, we've got to get our children more independent and more employable. But using Olmstead to really, again, equal access and equal opportunity for those children with disabilities. And also the language. There's only about 3 paragraphs of the transition language of IDA. And when you look at it, it sounds just like Olmstead. And that's the bookend. And sometimes reminding that ARD committee or 504 committee or whatever your child is, or IEP committee, we call them here in Texas, that child who's 16, 17, 18-year-olds now is going to be your next door neighbor. It's going to be going to church with you. It's going to be at the grocery store with you. It's going to be at the football game on Friday night. And so sometimes reminding them of what kind of neighbor would you like to have the next 40 or 50 years is a good way to help bridge that conversation about making sure that they have equal access and equal opportunity, which is ADA, Olmstead, IDA, call it what you will. Those are the 2 key phrases, equal access and equal opportunity to those things that student needs to become a productive citizen with a good shot of independence and employability.
Do you have any additional thoughts of how we can use Olmstead or additional thoughts of, on Olmstead and how we can help an individual to have an appropriate transition?
Well, sure, and it's not just the plan. Is sometimes if you have, if you're wheelchair reliant or have mobility issues, then you want to make sure everything's accessible. The program's accessible. If it's on the 2nd floor, can you get there? If you are visually impaired or use the internet in a different way than just using a mouse, you're using some other technology, is the internet site accessible? There is so much online. A lot of colleges online, a lot of training programs is online. There's so much online. It's really important to have a good internet accessibility. So that's also the skills. Well, a lot of times we don't think of being technologically fluent as a job skill. Yeah, it is, because the graduating class of 2011 didn't know what life was before the internet. So ensuring that the student is technologically fluent in basic computer language, accessing internet, navigating internet is absolutely critical because almost everything is done online in terms of employment these days.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point.
I'll benchmark there, Luke, because I know you only go to a certain hour.
Yeah, well, of course I know the owner, so it's not a problem with us going a little late. But I think that pretty much gets that. We may even bounce some of those issues around again, some of the things about accessibility when you come on the show in September. So, David, listen, I really appreciate your insight regarding Olmstead. I appreciate you being on the show. We'll have you on again in a few weeks. But thanks for taking time out of your Saturday and being on the show. We really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. The irony is I'm at a library, which would be very, very quiet, but there's actually two screaming kids near me. You probably hear them in the background. So there you go.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me as a guest. And remember, if there's any questions, just email Lou at his email or my email, which is specialedmarine@yahoo.com. Just like it sounds, specialedmarine@yahoo.com. Email me at any time. Always happy to return an email with a question.
Really great. Okay, Dave. Have a great Saturday. Okay. Be well.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay. That's we're winding up today's show. A couple of things. Again, I want to go back and remind everybody to contact Channel 8 here in Houston. Again, that number is what is their number? Number is 713-748-8888, and we want to get emails out. We want to call them and tell them we want the Dream League game to be shown on August 29th at 11 Eastern Time. We want to, and of course, contact HoustonPublicRadio.org /contact and say, look, we need to have this game televised. So please do that. Please call them, 713-748-8888. Next week's show, I'm going to have my colleague who works out of my firm, and also he does some tutoring, Sidney Woolman, who's also an advocate. He also does tutoring. A really, really incredible guy, and I really think you'll find that show really fascinating, so tune in. Also, these shows are also archived on the website at cypressradio.org, and you go to the tab On Air, look at my name, Louis Geigerman, you can find any shows that we've been doing. But thanks for listening. Please contact me and let me know you're listening. It's kind of hard to really get an idea how many people are listening to the show, especially when a lot of people are listening on the Internet. It's really hard to gauge that. So if you just send me a line on SPEDradio103.5 @gmail.com, that would be great. You can even tweet me. If you tweet Louis Narda, hashtag SPEDHour, that would be great. But email and let me know that you're listening, because I'm trying to gauge where the people are listening from. I know we have people listening in Alaska, California, but we just kind of want to get an idea of where our audience is. So anyway, thanks for listening.